The howling winds of Ardaxis Prime tore through the dense purple foliage as James Harrison pressed himself against the trunk of a massive tree. Blood trickled down his arm from a shallow cut, but he barely noticed it. After 3 days of surviving in this alien wilderness, minor injuries had become routine. He wasn't supposed to be here. The diplomatic shuttle carrying him and other human representatives had been diverted to this planet due to a supposed navigation malfunction. Now he found himself fighting for survival in what he increasingly suspected was some kind of test. A distant screech echoed through the canopy. James held his breath, counting seconds as he had been trained to do during his years as a survival specialist. The sound came again, closer this time. Whatever was hunting him was smart, using the wind to mask its approach. Through the corner of his eye, he caught a flash of silver, too uniform to be natural. The movement spoke of intelligence and training. His pursuer was no animal, but someone equally skilled in the art of the hunt. James had one advantage: they clearly didn't expect him to have survived this long. 3 days without proper equipment or weapons should have broken most beings. But humanity had thrived precisely because they refused to break. The silver flash appeared again, and this time James was ready. He threw himself into a controlled roll just as an energy spear embedded itself in the tree where he had been standing. The move brought him face to face with his hunter. She was magnificent. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her silvery skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that shifted like flowing water. Armor that seemed to be made of living metal hugged her athletic frame. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, solid gold with vertical pupils that widened in surprise at his sudden movement. Impressive, she spoke in perfect English, her voice carrying harmonics that made his spine tingle. No human has ever detected my approach before. James maintained his defensive stance, analyzing possible escape routes even as he responded. Maybe you're not as stealthy as you think. A laugh like chiming crystals escaped her. Oh, I like this one. I am Zenera, Huntmaster of the Artaxian elite. And you, James Harrison, have proven yourself far more interesting than we anticipated. Glad I could entertain, he replied dryly, noting how she knew his name. I don't suppose this was all just a big misunderstanding. Zenera moved with liquid grace as she circled him, her movements both predatory and admiring. Our species has watched humanity for some time, evaluating your potential. When your shuttle entered our space, we saw an opportunity to test one of your best survival specialists directly. Could have just asked, James said, matching her movements to maintain distance. I give great interviews. Another musical laugh. But then we wouldn't have seen your true capabilities. 3 days alone in one of our deadliest environments, without tools or weapons. You've adapted to toxic flora, evaded apex predators, and even managed to turn some of our own hunting techniques against my subordinates. I'm a quick study, he shrugged, though his muscles remained tensed for action. The real question is, what happens now? Zenara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a deeper blue. Now you face your final test. Defeat me in combat, and you'll earn a place among our elite warriors. Fail, and... She let the sentence hang. James had seconds to react as she launched herself at him with superhuman speed. He dropped and rolled, using a fallen branch to deflect her spear thrust. The wood should have shattered against the energy weapon, but somehow held. The branch is from a conductwood tree, Zenera called out, pressing her attack with fluid grace. You've been paying attention to your environment. Good. Their battle became a dance of strike and counterstrike. James knew he couldn't match her raw strength or speed, so he focused on efficiency of movement, using her own momentum against her when possible. Each exchange taught him more about her fighting style, while she seemed increasingly intrigued by his adaptability. Your technique, she commented during a brief respite, it evolves with each exchange. How do you learn so quickly? James wiped sweat from his brow, keeping the branch ready. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical capabilities. It's our ability to adapt, to take what we learn and immediately put it to use. Yes, Zanara's eyes gleamed with growing excitement. This is exactly what we hope to find. Show me more, James Harrison. Show me why humanity has survived against all odds. The combat resumed with increased intensity. James found himself mixing Earth martial arts with movements he'd observed from Zenera, creating an entirely new fighting style on the fly. Several times he came close to landing a serious hit, only to be driven back by her superior reach and strength. But he noticed something else: her attacks had shifted from lethal strikes to testing maneuvers. She was studying him as much as he was studying her. Finally, after a particularly complex exchange that left them both breathing heavily, Zenera lowered her spear. Her patterns now pulsed with a bright, almost fluorescent blue. Enough, she declared, her voice rich with satisfaction. You've more than proven yourself. James kept his guard up, branch still ready. Just like that? Just like that, she confirmed, then added with a predatory smile, though I must admit, my interest has become personal. Your species has such fascinating potential, and you, James Harrison, are an exemplar of humanity's finest qualities. Is this the part where you tell me this was all an elaborate dating service? He asked, only half joking. Zanara's laugh echoed through the forest. Perhaps. Our people believe in testing compatibility through combat and survival. You've demonstrated strength, intelligence, and adaptability beyond any human we've observed. Such qualities should be preserved. James finally lowered his branch, reading the genuine appreciation in her alien features. You know, on Earth we usually start with dinner and conversation. Then allow me to offer both. She stepped closer, her height forcing him to look up to meet her gaze. Along with the opportunity to help forge a new future between our peoples. That is, if you're interested in exploring just how compatible our species might be. Looking into those golden eyes, seeing the blend of warrior's respect and personal interest, James felt himself smiling. 3 days of survival, a combat test, and now this. Somehow, it felt perfectly human to find romance in the midst of such chaos. Well, he said, you did just try to kill me. Dinner's the least you could do. The great hall of the Artaxian High Council gleamed with living metal and bioluminescent crystals, its architecture reflecting the organic-mechanical fusion that defined their civilization. James stood before the assembled council members, acutely aware of both his humanity and the unusual circumstances that had brought him here. Zenera stood beside him, her silver skin patterns pulsing with subtle hues that he was learning to read as indicators of her mood. The current pattern suggested confidence tinged with concern. Huntmaster Zenera, the council elder's voice resonated through the chamber, your recommendation to fast-track a human into our warrior ranks is unprecedented. Some question your objectivity in this matter. A tall, imposing Artaxian warrior stepped forward. His patterns burned with aggressive reds and oranges. I, Warmaster Thrax, challenge this human's worthiness. Let him face our traditional trials, all of them. Zanara's patterns flickered with irritation. He has already survived our deadliest hunting grounds unarmed, Thrax. Few of our own warriors could match that feat. Perhaps, Thrax's metallic armor clinked as he moved closer, but there are other trials. Tests of knowledge, of loyalty, of compatibility. His emphasis on the last word carried clear implications. James spoke up, his voice calm but carrying authority. I accept all trials. He turned to address the full council. I understand your concerns. Humanity's history is filled with first-contact situations, some peaceful, some not. But what defines us isn't our initial reaction to the unknown, but how quickly we adapt to embrace it. The council elder's patterns shifted to a thoughtful blue. Speak further, human. Your people value strength proved through trial. So do we. But humanity's strength isn't just physical, it's our ability to learn, to grow, to take the impossible and make it possible. Give me your trials. Let me show you not just what I can do, but what humanity and Artaxians might accomplish together. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Zanara's patterns now pulsed with pride and something deeper, more personal. The elder raised a hand for silence. Very well. You will face 3 trials. First, the trial of mind. You must learn our complete warrior history and demonstrate mastery of our combat philosophies. Second, the trial of body. You will battle our finest warriors in sequence without rest. Finally, the trial of spirit, the nature of which is known only to those who reach it. Thraxa's patterns showed satisfaction. No outsider has ever completed all 3 trials. Most fail to survive the second. Then I'll be the first, James replied, meeting the warrior's gaze steadily. When do we begin? The first trial proved more challenging than expected. Artaxian warrior philosophy was deeply intertwined with their unique biology. Their combat techniques relied on abilities humans didn't possess: bioluminescent communication, enhanced strength, natural armor. But where others might have seen impossibility, James saw opportunity. He spent days in their archives, working with Zanara to understand not just the techniques, but their underlying principles. He learned to read pattern languages, to recognize the subtle shifts that telegraphed an Artaxian's intentions in combat. You approach our ways differently than expected, Zanara observed one evening as they studied together. Most would try to simply memorize and imitate. James smiled, looking up from a historical text. That would be like trying to fly by strapping on wings. Instead, I'm learning how your people think, why you fight the way you do. Then I can adapt those principles to human capabilities. Her patterns shifted to a deep purple he'd never seen before. Your mind intrigues me as much as your strength, James Harrison. Few of my own people show such insight. The moment between them grew charged with unspoken possibilities. James found himself increasingly aware of her presence, the way her pattern seemed to dance when she looked at him, how her voice carried harmonics that affected him on a primal level. The trial of mind culminated in a public demonstration. James presented his analysis of Artaxian combat philosophy, then showed how he'd adapted their techniques to work within human limitations. He demonstrated how smaller size could be an advantage, how human flexibility could compensate for lesser strength. The council was impressed, but Thrax remained skeptical. Clever theories, he growled. But the trial of body will prove whether they work in practice. The combat trial began at dawn the next day. James faced a gauntlet of Artaxian warriors, each specializing in a different combat style. He met them with his hybrid techniques, combining earth martial arts with his adapted versions of Artaxian methods. Hours passed. Sweat soaked his training gear as he faced opponent after opponent. Some matches he won through superior technique, others through endurance and tactical thinking. A few he lost, but even in defeat he showed such skill that he earned respect. Finally, only Thrax remained. The War Master towered over James, his patterns blazing with aggressive energy. You've survived longer than expected, human. But now you face a true master of our arts. What followed was the most intense combat James had ever experienced. Thrax was everything he claimed to be: powerful, skilled, and utterly committed to proving human inadequacy. But James had learned more than just techniques during his trials. He had learned to read the living metal of Artaxian armor, to predict how it would flow and shift. He had studied their pattern language until it became instinct. Most importantly, he had learned that victory didn't always mean defeating an opponent, sometimes it meant proving one's worth through sheer determination. The battle raged until both combatants were exhausted. James's innovative techniques scored several hits, while Thrax's superior strength left its mark in bruises and minor injuries. Finally, they reached a point where neither could gain advantage. Enough, the council elder called out. The trial is complete. Thraxa's patterns showed confusion. But there is no clear victor. The trial of body tests more than just combat prowess, the elder explained. It tests endurance, adaptability, and wisdom to know when combat should end. Your equal match proves the humans worth more than an easy victory would have. James and Thrax looked at each other with new respect. The War Master's patterns shifted to a grudging blue. Perhaps I was too quick to judge. Zenera stepped forward, her patterns radiating joy and pride. He has proven himself in mind and body. Now only the trial of spirit remains. The elder's patterns turned serious. Yes. And given what we have seen, perhaps it is time to reveal its true nature. He turned to James. The trial of spirit tests not just the individual, but the potential for true unity between peoples. Are you prepared to face it? James caught Zenara's eye, saw the complex swirl of emotions in her patterns, and understood that this final trial would determine more than just his standing among her people. It would determine their future together. I am ready, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The Temple of Unity rose like a living mountain from the heart of the Artaxian capital, its crystalline spires pulsing with ancient power. James stood before its massive doors, watching the living metal flow in patterns he now recognized as sacred symbols. The trial of spirit has existed since our first contact with other species, the council elder explained, his patterns shifting with reverence. But none have ever passed it fully. Most cannot even enter the temple. Zenera stepped forward, her own patterns dancing with nervous energy. The temple responds to potential. It sees not just what we are, but what we might become together. Together? James raised an eyebrow. So this isn't just my trial? The trial of spirit tests compatibility between species, she confirmed, meeting his gaze. Not just physical or mental, but spiritual resonance. The potential to merge our people's strengths. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Their growing attraction had become impossible to ignore, but this would test whether it was truly possible for their species to connect on the deepest level. The temple doors began to move, flowing like liquid metal. As they parted, a soft luminescence spilled out, reminding James of Earth's aurora borealis. He felt Zenara's hand slip into his, her silver skin warm against his palm. We enter together, she said softly, or not at all. The temple interior defied conventional geometry. Corridors shifted and flowed, responding to their presence. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with bioluminescent patterns that mirrored Zenara's emotional state, and, surprisingly, appeared to respond to James's as well. The patterns, he observed, they're changing with both of us. Impossible, Thraxa's voice made them turn. The War Master had followed them in, his patterns showing genuine shock. The temple has never responded to a non-Artaxian before. As they moved deeper into the temple, James felt a growing connection not just to Zenera, but to the living architecture around them. The patterns began telling a story, humanity's story, interpreted through Artaxian sensibilities. He saw Earth's great migrations, its countless adaptations, its relentless drive to explore and understand. Your people, Zenera breathed, watching the displays, they've faced extinction-level events multiple times, yet always survived, always adapted. Just like yours, James replied, recognizing Artaxian history in other patterns. Your people survived the great stellar extinction, rebuilt from nearly nothing, learned to merge biology and technology. They reached a central chamber where the patterns flowed together, merging human and Artaxian histories into new configurations. The air itself seemed charged with possibility. The chamber of potential, the elder announced. Here, the temple will test your true compatibility. Are you prepared? James looked at Zenera, saw his own mix of hope and uncertainty reflected in her patterns. Together, he said, echoing her earlier words. They stepped into the chamber's center. The patterns around them intensified, swirling faster. James felt a presence brush against his mind, ancient, powerful, curious. From Zanara's sharp intake of breath, she felt it too. The presence seemed to examine them, not just their physical forms but their very essence. James felt memories surface, his childhood dreams of the stars, his years of training, the moment he first saw Zanara in the forest. Alongside them, he caught glimpses of her memories, her rise to hunt master, her secret fascination with humanity, the growing feelings she developed for him. The patterns began to shift, showing possible futures. They saw children with silver-tinted skin and human eyes, possessing both human adaptability and Artaxian strength. They saw great ships crewed by both species, exploring the galaxy together. They saw challenges too, cultural conflicts, biological hurdles, the hard work of building trust between peoples. Through it all, their connection grew stronger. James could feel Zanara's emotions as if they were his own, understanding finally the full depth of pattern language. She, in turn, experienced human intuition and adaptability firsthand. The chamber erupted in brilliant light. When it faded, both James and Zanara bore new marks. His skin now held faint traces of Artaxian patterns, while her patterns had taken on subtle variations never before seen in her species. By the first ones, Thrax whispered, his previous skepticism forgotten. They've achieved true resonance. The Elder's patterns blazed with joy. In all our history, no pairing has shown such potential. The temple has not only accepted your bond, it has blessed it with physical changes. Zanara touched James's new patterns wonderingly. You feel different, closer somehow. You too, he replied, marveling at how he could now sense her emotions clearly. I think we just redefined compatible. But before they could fully process what had happened, alarm patterns flashed through the temple. A young warrior burst in, his patterns screaming danger. Elder. War Master. We've detected multiple unauthorized ships entering our system. They bear the marks of the corrupt ones. Thrax's patterns shifted to battle-ready crimson. The devourers dare to attack now? Not attack, the Elder's patterns showed grim understanding. They sensed what happened here. The devourers consume unique biological traits. A successful human-Artaxian bonding would be irresistible to them. James felt Zanara's surge of protective fury through their new connection. They cannot have him, she declared, her patterns burning with determination. No, James agreed, strategic plans already forming in his mind. But maybe we can use this. You wanted to see humanity's adaptability in action? Well, now you'll get to see how we handle threats to those we care about. Their eyes met, understanding flowing between them. They had just proven that humans and Artaxians could achieve incredible things together. Now they would show the galaxy exactly what that meant. The temple's patterns shifted again, this time showing combat configurations. Both species' battle strategies began merging, suggesting new possibilities. The first test had been about proving compatibility. Now came the true challenge, protecting what they had discovered together. Through their new bond, James and Zanara shared a single thought: whatever came next, they would face it as one. The Artaxian war chamber hummed with tension as holographic displays showed the approaching devourer fleet. Through his new connection to Zanara, James could feel the collective anxiety of her people. The devourers were more than just enemies, they were cosmic parasites who consumed unique biological traits from other species. Their ships are unlike anything we've encountered before, Thrax reported, his patterns reflecting tactical concern. Organic mechanical hybrid vessels, each one adapted from consumed technologies. James studied the displays, his mind already working on strategies. How do they usually attack? They seek to capture, not destroy, the Elder explained. Their boarding parties inject parasitic forms that take control of victims, allowing them to harvest biological characteristics while keeping the host alive for study. Through their bond, James felt Zanara's fierce protectiveness surge. They want what we discovered in the temple. The successful merger of human and Artaxian traits. Then let's give them something they don't expect, James said, an idea forming. Your people have always fought them head-on, right? Matching strength against strength? Thraxa's patterns showed confusion. How else would one fight? Like humans do, James smiled. Adaptively, creatively, and with a few tricks they'll never see coming. Zanara, remember how I survived in your hunting grounds? Using the environment itself as a weapon? Her patterns lit up with understanding. Yes. And through our bond, I can see, oh, that's brilliantly devious. Over the next hour, they developed a plan that combined human tactical innovation with Artaxian technology. The devourers would expect a direct defense of the planet. Instead, they would spring a trap using the very thing their enemy wanted most, the unique bond between human and Artaxian. As they prepared, James and Zanara discovered their connection growing stronger. They moved in perfect synchronization during combat drills, their fighting styles blending into something entirely new. His ability to read her patterns became nearly instantaneous, while she gained an intuitive grasp of human adaptability. Your changes are progressing, the elder observed, watching them train. The temple's blessing continues to evolve. Indeed, James's pattern marks had become more pronounced, while Zanara's silver skin now showed subtle variations that reflected human genetic influence. Together, they were becoming something unprecedented, living proof that their species could achieve remarkable things together. The devourers made their move at dawn. Their massive ships descended through the atmosphere, organic tentacles writhing against metal hulls. As expected, they focused on the temple, drawn by the unique energy signature of James and Zanara's bond. They're deploying boarding parties, Thrax reported from the command center. Multiple insertion points around the temple perimeter. James and Zanara exchanged glances, their plan already in motion. Let them come, she said, her patterns showing fierce anticipation. The devourer boarding parties were horrifying hybrids of stolen biological traits. Multiple arms ending in organic weapons, bodies covered in living armor, faces bearing features from dozens of consumed species. They moved with unnatural coordination, linked by a hive mind. But they weren't prepared for what awaited them. James and Zanara stood in the temple's central chamber, apparently vulnerable. Through their bond, they coordinated the complex trap they'd prepared. As the devourers pressed forward, drawn by their unique biological signature, hidden defenses activated. The temple itself became a weapon. Its living metal walls flowed like quicksilver, trapping and separating enemy units. Holographic duplicates of James and Zanara appeared throughout the complex, confusing the hive mind's coordination. And most importantly, the temple's patterns began broadcasting a signal that turned the devourers' biological absorption ability against them. Now! James called out, feeling Zanara's power flow through their connection. Their combined energy, amplified by the temple, surged through the complex. The devourers had come to consume their unique traits. Instead, they found themselves overwhelmed by the pure potential of human Artaxian unity. Their stolen biological components began breaking down, unable to process the complexity of what they were experiencing. Through their bond, James and Zanara fought as one. His tactical adaptability merged with her warrior skills, creating fighting techniques that even the devourers' stolen knowledge couldn't counter. Where one moved, the other was already in position to strike. Their patterns danced in harmony, creating interference signals that disrupted enemy coordination. The hive mind is destabilizing, Thrax reported with awe. Their entire neural network is collapsing. In orbit, the devourer ships began to fail as the psychic backlash spread through their organic components. The trap hadn't just protected the temple, it had turned the enemy's greatest strength into a fatal weakness. As the last devourer forces retreated in disarray, James and Zenera stood together in the temple chamber, their bodies glowing with shared power. The patterns around them told a new story now, not just of compatibility, but of revolutionary potential. "You've done more than defeat an enemy," the elder said, his patterns showing deep satisfaction. "You've proven that unity between our peoples isn't just possible, it's transformative." James felt Zenara's joy and pride flowing through their bond. "I think we're just beginning to understand what's possible," she said, taking his hand. Through their connection, they both sensed the changes continuing within them. Their successful merger of traits hadn't just made them stronger, it had opened the door to entirely new forms of evolution. The temple's patterns swirled with possibilities, showing futures neither of their species had imagined possible. But as they stood there, savoring their victory, a new alert sounded. The devourers weren't just retreating, they were sending signals across space. More of their kind would come, drawn by the power they had witnessed. "Let them come," James said, feeling Zenara's immediate agreement through their bond. "We'll be ready." "Yes," she replied, her patterns blazing with determination. "And next time, we'll show them even more of what humanity and Artaxians can achieve together." The temple's patterns shifted one final time, showing their combined strength spreading across the stars. They had faced their first test as a unified force, but both knew it was just the beginning of a much greater journey. 1 year after the Devourer attack, the Temple of Unity had become a symbol of transformation. Its crystalline spires now pulsed with new patterns that combined human and Artaxian elements, reflecting the changes spreading through both societies. James stood at its highest observation point, watching ships from Earth arrive through the newly established transit corridor. His reflection in the living metal walls showed how much he'd changed. The Artaxian patterns on his skin had stabilized into elegant swirls that shifted with his emotions, while his physical capabilities had evolved to incorporate aspects of both species. Through his bond with Zenera, he felt her approach before he heard her. "The Earth delegation has arrived," she said, sliding her arms around him from behind. Her own evolution had been equally remarkable, her silver skin now showed subtle variations that reflected human genetic influence, while her combat abilities had grown to incorporate human adaptability. "Nervous?" he asked, though their bond told him she was more excited than anxious. "About telling them?" Her patterns rippled with joy. "They'll find out soon enough. Our child's genetic scans are already causing quite a stir among both human and Artaxian scientists." James turned to face her, placing a hand on her abdomen where their baby grew, the first natural human-Artaxian hybrid. The pregnancy had been considered impossible until their temple-blessed bond rewrote the rules of genetic compatibility. "The scans show perfect integration," she continued, her patterns dancing with maternal pride. "All the strengths of both species, with none of the weaknesses. The temple's blessing made sure of that." Their moment was interrupted by Thrax's arrival. The War Master's patterns showed urgent excitement. "You're needed in the council chamber. The Devourers have been detected in the Cygnus sector." But rather than concern, James and Zenera shared a smile. Since their first victory, they'd been preparing for this moment. Each Devourer attack had been met with increasingly sophisticated defenses based on their combined insights. What their enemy saw as prey had become a formidable force. The council chamber was already full when they arrived. Human military advisors sat alongside Artaxian warriors, their cooperation now seamless after months of shared training and cultural exchange. The elders' patterns showed satisfaction as James and Zenera took their places. "The Devourers think they'll find us vulnerable," the elder began. "Instead, they'll discover how much stronger we've become together." Holographic displays showed the combined fleet waiting in orbit, Earth ships equipped with Artaxian living metal armor, Artaxian vessels enhanced with human AI and tactical systems. But more impressive were the crews themselves. Through a program inspired by James and Zenara's success, other human Artaxian pairs had achieved their own forms of bond, each unique but all contributing to a new unified fighting force. The latest generation of temple-blessed pairs has completed training, Thrax reported, his former skepticism long replaced by fierce advocacy for the program. Their combat effectiveness exceeds all projections. Through their bond, James felt Zanara's pride in how far they'd come. What had started as a chance encounter in a hunting trial had sparked an evolutionary leap for both species. Their child would be born into a world where the boundaries between human and Artaxian were increasingly fluid, where the strengths of both peoples merged to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. The devourers sought to consume what makes us unique, James addressed the council. Instead, they drove us to discover our greatest potential. Together, we aren't just stronger, we're evolving into something entirely new. As if in response to his words, the temple's patterns flowed throughout the chamber, showing visions of the future. They saw great ships exploring the furthest reaches of space, crewed by beings who carried the best of both worlds in their very DNA. They saw new civilizations encountering their unified people, finding not conquerors but pioneers who understood the true power of combining differences. The temple shows us possibility, the elder said, but you have shown us how to make it reality. Your union was just the beginning. Later, as they prepared the fleet for departure, James and Zanara stood again in the temple's central chamber. Around them, other bonded pairs trained, their movements showing the same seamless integration that had once seemed impossible. Do you ever regret it? James asked, though he could feel her answer through their bond. Choosing a human mate, changing the course of both our species? Zanara's patterns shifted to that deep purple he now knew meant profound love. From the moment I saw you survive our trials, I knew you were different. But this? She gestured to their surroundings, to the future growing within her. This is beyond even my wildest dreams. Their bond hummed with shared emotion as they watched a new group of human Artaxian pairs enter the temple for blessing. Each couple would develop their own unique connection, contributing new variations to their evolving people. Their child would be among the first of a new generation, not just human or Artaxian, but something gloriously, powerfully both. The temple's patterns shifted one final time, showing the vast expanse of space filled with possibilities. The devourers had wanted to steal their uniqueness, never understanding that true power came not from consuming differences, but from combining them into something greater. As they prepared to face their enemy again, James and Zanara shared a moment of perfect understanding. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to change, to grow, could merge with Artaxian power and tradition to forge a new path to the future. Their love hadn't just changed them, it had transformed two civilizations and opened the door to unlimited potential. The next chapter of their story was about to begin, and through their bond, they faced it together, not as human and Artaxian, but as pioneers of a new way of being. Their child would be born into a universe where the very concept of species had been redefined, where love could literally evolve into new forms of existence. And that was just the beginning.